Hey there, everybody. This is Renessa Boley Layne, and welcome to another conversation on creating your perfect work. If you follow me, then you know that I am all about helping you to discover, design, and get highly paid to do work you love, whether that means radically changing careers, launching a business, or bringing your big idea to life. So I am super excited about our conversation today. Like, this one is a good one. And so my guest today, whom I'll introduce in a moment, is the Chief of Staff for SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management. And this conversation is so timely, no matter where you are on your perfect work journey. So if you're an HR professional, then obviously you're going to resonate all day long with our guest here. But if you are outside of HR, if you're a career person in whatever function in the business, or if you're an entrepreneur, this conversation is going to be essential to your career or your business in ways that you would never expect. So I want to make sure that you are tuning in to that as well. And so this beautiful woman who is sharing the screen with me is Emily M. Dickens. And I'm going to read all the formal bio about Emily so you know what a bad woman that she is and why we have her on this conversation. And then as always, I'm going to tell you what I really think. I'm going to tell you why she's super amazing and why I had to have her on the show with you. So Emily M. Dickens serves as SHRM's corporate secretary. She's the chief of staff. She's the head of government affairs. So she wears a lot of different hats. She is the executive who's responsible for coordinating staff to implement the CEO's vision. She's the liaison to the board. She works with the subsidiary boards. Like, she is a bad woman who does a lot of great things. She has held every title that you can possibly imagine, from general counsel to chief relationship officer to SVP, VP for public policy, assistant vice president. She's done it all. But she has a heart to serve. She has a heart to give. And she's got so much value in her journey that she's going to be able to share with you. And so in this conversation, we're going to be talking a lot about opportunity and how you can create opportunity and how you can make the most of the opportunities that you have in front of you. And Emily is just a walking example of that in her career. And there's just so much that you'll be able to learn from her to apply to your own work, to really be able to create work you love and get highly paid for it. So that's her in a formal nutshell. Here's why I think she's awesome. As you know, I always handpick folks to be on these, this interview series, because I want you to experience the best. And I want you to see people who have succeeded in great ways, who've overcome lots of challenges and all of that. But I love to bring models of just success in so many different ways. And what I loved about Emily is, sometimes when you meet folks and you see them doing great things, sometimes we can fuel our careers with talent. Like, we're good at what we do, we've got the degrees, we've got the credential, and so we rise in the ranks. But then sometimes you meet folks and you just see an energy about them. Like, there's a passion, and there's an energy, and there's a drive and an electricity. And so when I first encountered Emily, I didn't meet her personally. I met her on video. Like, I saw a number of videos of places where she talked, and I was like, she's got such great energy. And I knew that energy was really driven by purpose. And so as I've gotten to know her a little bit, there is a through line of purpose that has driven all of the different roles that she's taken on. And so when we start to think about creating our perfect work, sometimes we're jumping from role to role or promotion to promotion, and we think the next title, the next, pay raise, the next this is always better. But we miss that through line of purpose. And she embodies what it means to make decisions around purpose and around mission. And we're going to talk about that and how you apply it to you. She's such a gem. She's going to delight you. And I'm super excited to welcome you. Emily, thank you for sharing the time with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I feel so much pressure right now.
No pressure at all. No pressure at all. I just want you, because sometimes, and I don't say stuff to just blow smoke. Sometimes we don't realize the impact that we have based on how we show up in the marketplace. We get our performance reviews and those kinds of things, but we really don't realize that there are intangible qualities that we bring to the marketplace that just make it a better place. And so whenever I can be effusive about and praise about folks, A, I mean it, but B, sometimes we need to hear it as well, just to know that who we are and how we show up, not just what we accomplish, makes a difference. And so no pressure at all. This is an amazing crew from all over the world. They're going to love you, but I wanted them to know why I already love you. So there we have it.
Thank you.
So I got lots of questions for you. But the first question is, obviously the interview series is about creating your perfect work. And when we talk about perfect work, we're not talking about everything being perfect. We're not talking about the fact that it's not challenging or it's not without risk or, all that kind of stuff, because that's par for the course. But perfect work is really knowing that that this is the mountain you're born to climb. This is the contribution you're supposed to have in the marketplace and all of that. So how do you know that the work that you're doing right now for SHRM is part of your perfect work?
Wow. I know every time I can advise someone or speak to a SHRM member and help them see that they changed a life.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when you hear you have to go to HR, people think it's for something bad. I'm going to be fired, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm one of those people who each and every time I've had to go engage with a member of human resources on a job, it's been a positive experience.
Yeah.
It's been either because someone was offering me a job,
yep.
someone was offering me a promotion or a raise, or someone was offering me a professional development opportunity, which oftentimes has more value than just about anything else, right? We don't talk about that. And so they'll engage with people every day. Hundreds of people, our HR people, could be engaging with each day, and not realizing that every time you gave some person an opportunity to do something different, to earn more money, to get a professional development opportunity, you were changing their lives and possibly the lives of every person that lives with them in their household. So therefore, you're changing the lives of their family and their friends.
Yeah.
And our HR professionals often are so busy because they're doing compliance, they're doing all this other stuff. They don't get to stop for a moment and say, what I do every day just made it easier for this woman to offer to get a tutor for their child, just made it easier for this woman to be able to ascend to a new position in a year, right? They don't get to enjoy the little things. And so I have a lot of fun pointing that out to them and helping them to see that amidst all the complaints that people have to have about HR, that they are changing millions of lives each day.
I want to even take a pause because I want the audience to know why this conversation that we're having is so important, and why I wanted to bring someone in from the Society of Human Resource Management, which goes by SHRM, and I'll be saying SHRM throughout because it's just less of a mouthful. But here's why. When we think about opportunities in creating our perfect work, oftentimes we're thinking about things outside of us. We got to go external. We got to go find somebody. We got to go find this other opportunity to then, redesign our success or something like that. And oftentimes your opportunity is right where you are. I mean, whether it's career, it's right where you are. And SHRM is at the forefront of literally revolutionizing work, the worker, and the workplace. And they're creating innovations and opportunities and insights and all of that really help you to do your job better. And oftentimes when you're looking to elevate, or when you're looking to make a shift, or where you're looking to do more and be more, HR can be a real asset to you. And I think we undervalue that. And so this conversation is going to unpack why there's so much value that might be right in your organization that you don't even know how to tap into. And so I want to make that clear, because some people might be listening and thinking, well, if I'm not an HR professional, what does this have to do with me? It has everything to do with you, because there's resources that can help you catapult and get you where you need to go. And I'll share stories as we go, examples of things that Emily will talk about. But that's why we're having this conversation. So briefly help us get a sense for, how did you even end up here? Because you are you're a lawyer by training. That's where you started out. You went into academia and all that kind of stuff, and now you're doing something completely different. Kind of help us understand the arc of your career journey.
Honestly, some days I don't understand it, right? And I think one time I talked about whether it's chance or planning, and sometimes you just have to let go and let your work speak for you.
Wow.
And so I talk about that a lot. I was talking with my coach today about what are the 5 things if people are going to work with me they should know about. And one of it is your loudest voice is your work ethic. So I would say my work ethic is how I find myself here. So again, I graduated, proud graduate of HBCU, North Carolina Central University. I did a year as an AmeriCorps Vista.
Okay.
And I was assigned to Habitat for Humanity, amazing, transformative year. And then went back to school, graduated from law school, and literally ended up working for the mayor of Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Okay.
And so I worked my way through school. So while I was going to law school at night, I was an admin at Duke University for a VP there. And I tell that part of the story because you never know who's watching you as you're working. So a faculty member in the law school who I'd never had a class with her, she was an advisor for a club. She came over to me and she said, do you have a job in the legal field once you graduate? And I said, no, I'm still working at Duke. I'm good. I'll take my time finding something that'll work for me as a next step. I might even see if I can get into legal there. And she said, my law partner is the newly elected mayor of Chapel Hill. He wants to hire a recent law graduate to help him run the mayor's office. He has petitioned the mayor's office to make a part-time position a full-time position. And I told him about you. And I was like, okay, she never taught me. She saw me as a member of, I was vice president of this club that she, was one of our advisors for. And I couldn't believe it. So I went and met with the mayor on a December evening and he hired me. And I spent the next few years really learning about local politics. I'd seen local politics from the volunteer side because my mom had volunteered in politics, but really from being inside the mayor's office. And Chapel Hill, if you know anything about Chapel Hill, North Carolina, they pay a lot of property taxes and they expect a lot for it.
Okay.
So it's a pretty busy mayor's office and it was a great experience. But he'd always said it's to be your first experience and it should be something you only do for a few years. So about 2.5 years in, he was like, okay, what's your next gig? And I'd met a number of other mayors through him. The mayor of Fayetteville, North Carolina at the time, I knew he had graduated from North Carolina Central School of Law as well. I talked to him from time to time and a position came up at a university in Fayetteville. Asked him about it. He said, well, I know the chancellor, I'll put a good word in for you. So again, he knew me, he knew my work, and I interviewed for that position and got that position. So I got to be a director of government and community affairs on an HBCU campus for a little over 5 years. And it was an amazing community. That community is a military town, if you know anything about that. So I did community affairs as well as our government relations, and it was an amazing time. But again, I got to engage with the UNC system office because that school was one of 17 in the UNC system. I get a call one morning from the VP of Federal Affairs and she says, I have a job for you. I'm creating an assistant VP position. I think you'll be amazing. I've enjoyed working with you over these last few years. I'm going to submit this job and I'll let you know. A couple of weeks later, I got an offer. So again, my work, and so that's why I say it's so important that your work speak for you. While during that time and while I was at Fayetteville State, I had met my current boss because he was the CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which represents the nation's public HBCUs. And I considered him a mentor of sorts. I would always have these discussions with him that said, Johnny, I want to get out of higher ed. That would be my discussion with him. And he had worked in corporate America. So I just felt calling him would get me insight on how I could move out of higher ed. And so we continued to have those discussions. And then literally I took a stretch assignment while I was at UNC Systems working on a special project with the president of the system on governance. Met the CEO of the Association of Governing Boards. I get a call, we're recruiting for a VP of Public Policy. Our CEO met you, would you be interested? Sure. Interviewed, got that job, and moved from North Carolina to the DC area. That was about 4.5 years ago. Got here, was very happy at AGP, and then I get a call from Johnny one day, and he said, I need you to come be my general counsel. Okay, so I end up there. Again, he knew my work. We'd never worked together, but he knew my work. We worked on projects. And then when he got the call to come to SHRM, he just told me I was coming to SHRM. So, and that's how I ended up at SHRM.
And I love the story, because I think the takeaway is so clear. Like, how we show up can create opportunities for us. How we show up, especially when no one is looking, right? So for those of us that are listening, whether you love your work, whether you're discontent with your work, whether you want to make a move or not, people are watching you, and they're not necessarily watching, to be, nitpicking your performance. People are just watching. And we have the opportunity at any moment in time to impress them, to honor them, to inspire them. It could be silently with how we deliver. It could be overtly with, going out of our way to do something. But every opportunity that, like, these are phone calls that came to her, inbound calls, not I'm knocking on the door trying to see, do y'all have something? And it had something to do with how she showed up in the marketplace. And so the first piece of that is, let's look inside and figure out, how am I showing up? How am I delivering? Who am I, independent of the opportunities that I may want to chase? And the reason why Emily's even on this interview is because I saw how she showed up. I didn't even know her. I just happened to see videos of her doing her work. And I was like, that energy, that's what I like. It was how she showed up. And so that's the key takeaway from all that she said, because I want to segue into another element that I think is really, really not unique about you, but I think is standout about you. And as I got to learn about Emily, I noticed with Emily, there was a core thread of purpose around the work that she does. And those of you listening might have missed it. So that's why I want to kind of bring it home so that you can understand it. And then I want her to talk a little bit more about it. When we think about redesigning our success, for whatever reason, when we think about wanting to make a pivot or a shift, a lot of times we make the decision to go away from something. Like, I don't like this company or this boss or this job anymore, blah, blah, blah. And I want away from the next thing. And whatever the next thing is, you think is going to be better than whatever this pot of mess that you happen to be in at the time. And sometimes we fail to think, and I always call it designing with the end in mind. Sometimes we fail to really kind of figure out what our end game is. What's the through line of our career or our business? What's our legacy? What do we want to be about? And as we learn about Emily, and I'll actually have to have her share this, one of the common through lines for her from a purpose standpoint has been this concept of access, and granting people access to things, whether it was in higher ed, whether it's with some of the historically Black colleges and universities that she's worked with, whether it's been within SHRM. And so can you help us understand what has access meant for you? Like, why has that been, or how has that been such an integral part of the work that you do and the purpose and the meaning behind the roles that you take on?
So I'd say, especially as we consider what is going on around us right now, mm-hmm. you can change lives through education. Mm-hmm. In my household, my dad had a 7th grade education. My mom, brilliant woman who graduated from high school and would have always loved to go to college, but couldn't afford to do so. For them, education was the thing they talked about the most. Mm-hmm. That you needed to make sure you read a lot, that you had to understand that you could get a college education. And once you got it, now you had to do something with it. Mm-hmm. But I think access to it. And so I think I talked to you earlier about, I often hear people talk about student loans, and that some of us have to rely on student loans to get that access. But once you get that education, that can't be ripped from your head, right? That is a foundation that can then be used for other things. College doesn't prepare you for your first job. President Ross used to say this all the time. It prepares you for your last job. Mm. And so we stop thinking about it in terms of it preparing you for that first job, and that is providing a foundation on which you build upon in each experience, whether it's a work experience or a learning experience, that provides you access to different things. Mm-hmm. If you look at the job I have now, and you said I wear a lot of hats, mm-hmm. I can point to something in my past, something I learned in college, or something I learned in law school, or something I learned in another position that is now helping me to do the job that I do today. And it's a hodgepodge of things. Yeah. But I ran offices for a mayor. So running an executive office for a CEO, check, got it. that, right? I worked for a university architect at Duke, right? And so the fact that admin services, the people that run the $60 million in buildings that we own, that they report to me. So they don't have to teach me how to read the floor plans or talk about our chillers or things like that. I learned all of that while I worked for a university architect at Duke. So I tell people, you never know the skills that you pick up, how one day all of that will be relevant in what you do. Budgets. When I was an EA at Duke, I had to manage the office budgets there. Now I got about 10 different budgets now, but no one had to teach me how to do that because I was the one that used to be responsible for that, right? So I tell people everything you pick up is important, and you never know when those learnings will be necessary in another job. And so by having that education, right, getting exposed to it, getting access to that is so important for what you need to do later. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. I truly believe having access to higher ed. And even I would say I grew up in New York City. And so back then I was a Regents kid. So if you know anything about New York City schools, you wanted to graduate and get a Regents diploma, having access. I went to Specialized High School Center for Writing. You had to apply to high school, right? Access to all those different things and education at all those different levels was so important to who I am today. And you want as many people to have that type of access as possible.
Yeah. And so as you're listening to Emily, start to flip the script and think about what's your through line? How do you connect the dots to purpose in your work? Because roles might look different, but when the underlying purpose is the same, then you have confidence that next role is right direction for you. For instance, when we think about the concept of access, in Emily's work in higher ed, part of the purpose was giving access, to resources and all of that for those students. And so in all of the roles that she did, that was the underlying goal of all of that, was we're creating these systems and policies and, all of that in place so that these students have more access to be able to do bigger and better things in their life. When we look at the work that she does with, historically Black colleges and universities, it's given those students, oftentimes who are first generation college students, are coming from backgrounds like Emily's, where they didn't have parents that were, had graduated college or whatnot. She's giving those kids access to bigger and better and greater. When we think about SHRM, everything about SHRM is to give you, me, and everybody else in the workplace access to be able to be gainfully employed, access to grow skills, access to develop. Like oftentimes when you think about HR is the gatekeeper between you getting the call and you not getting the call, right? Everybody's like, did you get the call back? Well, HR is the gatekeeper for that. There's a whole lot of access going on. And as you're thinking about elevating within your company, you're thinking about professional development and mentoring and all those plans and processes that get put into place organizationally is about you having access to the C-suite, access to the executive level, access to senior leadership, right? And so when you think about what she's done, these aren't all disparate, jobs, even though they look very different, but the core purpose underneath that for her has been driven by giving people access to what they need to be better versions of themselves. And so when you start thinking about redesigning, think about it with the designing with the end in mind, and start questioning yourself, what's the underlying purpose around what I'm doing, and let that then drive how you make decisions around what you want to do next. Fair? Alrighty, so what's really interesting, you say something, and we're gonna go back to this whole, kind of work thing. I remember reading an article, I don't know if you wrote it, it might've been a blog post that you'd written or something, but you said that when you joined SHRM, you trusted that you would enjoy the work, but you worried that you wouldn't develop a passion for the work. So tell us more about that, because passion is a big part of redesigning success and all that. So what did you mean by that statement, and how did you then end up navigating the whole decision to join?
So there's an Ella Baker quote that I love. It says, I was never working for an organization, I was working for a cause. So not on purpose, right? But it just turned out for every job I've had, there was some cause. So my work led to someone leaving better once I had engaged with them, right? They either were enrolled in an institution of higher ed, or we had a budget provision that worked well for our schools. Whatever I was doing, there was always an underlying cause. And so down as much organization, there was a value I can point to that purpose. So when, again, I glossed over it a bit, but literally our CEO got an offer on June 1st to come and be the CEO of SHRM. And he would begin the following January. So he gave 6 months notice, having been CEO for 7 years, gave 6 months notice. And I remember so clearly, it was a Friday and I went home and I was like, oh my goodness, look at all the stuff we've got to do to prepare for the board meeting. I'm thinking of all the other stuff. And Monday he says, everybody called me this weekend to find out what I was going to do, what my plans were, if anybody's going to come with me, things of that nature. And you didn't call. And I'm like, Johnny, we got stuff to do in this 6 months. I'm thinking about that. And so he said, I'm not even worried about it because you're going to come with me. So being the lawyer that I am, I said, okay, when I see something in writing, but other than that, we got work to do. And literally one day I walk in his office and he just shows me his screen and he's like, what does that look like to you? And it was an offer to come and be his chief of staff at SHRM. So that's how I ended up at SHRM. And so I had this moment where I thought, oh my goodness, every job I've had up until now, there's been this bigger purpose. And I was meeting with my Gallup coach at that time. We were going over some things and it came out again that purpose was really important to me in my work. And it wasn't the first thing I led with, but I always found my purpose. And so that I calmed down a bit because I knew there was an opportunity for me to find my purpose. Mm-hmm. And my purpose became what I said to you earlier, is helping HR professionals see the full value of their work. Because when they see the full picture, they understand why every decision they make in terms of who they open the door to for employment mm-hmm. impacts someone's life to the good, mm-hmm. or it could be to the bad if they don't make the right decision. Mm-hmm. Every decision they make impacts the culture of an organization, how it's perceived by those who are working there, and how it's perceived by those who are trying to work there. Yeah. And so I wanted them to see that they are coming from a position of extreme power. Mm-hmm. And that workplaces of today, where we spend more time often than we spend in our homes, mm-hmm. are places where we need cultures where people feel included and where there's a focus on inclusion and not just on numbers, which is the outcome of diversity, right? So we've been saying focus on inclusion. You can bring all the people in the world that look like the rainbow in, but if it's not an inclusive environment where everyone feels their voice is heard, or they have at least somebody who can hear them, where everyone can find commonalities other than the things we see with people, then you're not creating the best workplace environments. And let me tell you something, people bring work home with them.
Yeah.
So we all know where you've had that day. My husband can tell when I've had one of those days. We bring it home with us. And so I don't want you every day bringing home the fact that you're in a culture that is suffocating you. And so HR professionals, from your talent people all the way through to your generalists, they control so much of how people are feeling about themselves today. And that's a heavy burden. Yeah. But I want them to know that they can wear that crown proudly and that they're doing it, they have been doing it, and they can continue to change even more lives for the good. So that's the purpose I had to find, but it took me a minute because at first it wasn't something I chose for myself. Yeah. Right. But once I knew what it was we were going to be doing and how much content, and again, you talk a lot, the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM has so much content. We have been talking for the last 2.5 years about elevating HR as a profession, elevating HR professionals, and elevating HR as a social force. Mm-hmm. And we can't ask you to do those things unless we provide the resources for you to do that. Mm-hmm. So we've spent a lot more time doing research and creating content that makes your life easier. And you're right, for a human resources professional, they're like, that's great. But what does it do for someone who's not? Yeah. I can't tell you the number of people who I've run into. Let's just talk about entrepreneurs, small businesses, yes. right? Many of whom can't afford to have a separate HR professional, right? They've got under 25 employees. I met this woman in North Carolina. We did an event at A&T. And she said, look, I'm a nurse by day. My husband and I started this business. He just got this huge federal contract. And I saw myself having to hire 20 people at one time. So that meant she said, I went online to SHRM's website. I became a member. I got all this content. Now I've got everything I need. She's a nurse by day, mm-hmm. but she's an entrepreneur. And she is helping to create jobs and businesses in her community, changing lives. And she used us as a resource. If you're someone who wants to make a change in your workplace, you don't have to be in HR. I literally just got off the phone with a soror of mine who works at Lowe's, and we were just talking about how everybody is a recruiter. You know, if you want people who are like you, who you believe would fit into the culture you have there, you must help recruit for that. We must all own the process of creating the culture in the workplaces in which we currently exist. And so it is important what we do. And if you take on that critical job of being a recruiter and trying to find people that you know will fit into that culture, that will work for you and work well with you, then that means some of our resources can help you as well. And as a professional, as I talk to people, I just talked a couple of weeks ago to Association of University Housing Officers. And you're all like, what are you talking to them about, right? Their world is upside down. Think about, during the last recession, people flocked to higher ed when they had no jobs, right? But all we keep hearing about is now people got to pay back those student loans 10 years later. So people aren't flocking there. And in the middle of COVID, schools have shut down. No one is living in campus housing. So you have tons of people without jobs that were really focused on taking care of student housing. How do those people adapt in an environment of COVID where those jobs may not be coming back? Right? What do they do? And so how do you use we've got content that talks about how do you adapt and reskill and upskill. We're in a recession. Yeah. And there's still jobs out there in particular areas. And so if you have a skill set and your job right now is not the job of the day that people want and people being laid off from that job, you've got to reskill and upskill so you can get a job tomorrow. We've got content like that. We work with the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. We're talking about those things. So SHRM is much bigger than just here for the person who's the HR professional. We're always going to serve those people because that is our core. Yeah. But we have recognized that there are other people who need access to the content that we're creating. And look, you should care about human resources. As you navigate your career, again, I hate to use that word gatekeeper, but that's it, right? So how do you meet people who are in that space? How do you get those people to assist you with your resume and talk to you and have real talk to you about what happens when I see your resume and there are errors on it, right? You know, what are the pitfalls? You know, what are there some keywords that maybe these automated systems pick up and then it puts you at the bottom of the pile, right? There are just little things. How do you get just even going to a SHRM chat? We have chat 100, we've got 500 and something chapters in 165 countries, right? So there's probably a SHRM chapter near every one of the people who are watching this. Yep. You can go to any of those events and just network with people who are in that field so they can give you some of their thoughts about how you're making this change to find your perfect work. So I can go on and on about that, but what I tell you is, what I learned is that, economic mobility is so important. Yep. We spend so much time about all of us can't be entrepreneurs. My sister picked up that entrepreneurial trait from my dad. They are it. I know that that's not me. And so if you're someone who needs a job and a job is how you gain economic mobility, you've got to get knee deep in this and know what employers are looking for. And that means you need to care about human resources and what they're looking for and developing relationships in that sphere. And I'd like you to consider a job in human resources. I'm not a human resources professional. I'm an executive who is now working in human resources. Mm-hmm. But there's tons of positions available for people who've done other jobs that can add value to the human resources space right now. You want more people who look like you being the gatekeepers? Then you need to go ahead and tap yourself on the shoulder and say, maybe this is something I can do. I've got this skill set. Can I adapt it to human resources? We need more people caring about and choosing this profession so that we can bring more people into the workplace that have the culture that we need so that workplace becomes a haven as opposed to a place where you got a culture that doesn't work for you.
Yeah. You said a mouthful. In a good way, like you captured so many points that I think are so critical and so important. And the one point that I wanted to drive home is this idea that when we think about creating perfect work and we think about impact, perfect work isn't just about radically changing your career. I'm going to go from being, an engineer to a pastry chef. Like that's not what we're talking about. Although that could be part of it, right? Yeah. But the point is that perfect work has a lot to do with your environment, what your workplace looks like, how you're contributing to the marketplace, what skill set you're using, how it's setting you up long term, for the end game as you think about your work. And as Emily more eloquently described than I can, HR is such a resource for that. Like the thing that you said about recruiting, like if you are big on diversity or D&I issues and you think your workplace is not diverse enough, or you think there's not enough women here and there or whatever, you don't think that there's enough people who look like you with your background, get out there and start recruiting. Like avail yourself to go to the college campus and be able to bring in some of those new college grads. Avail yourself, to be part of the pipeline that helps to recruit folks who look more like you. That doesn't mean you have to change jobs. It just means that you get to be a part of that effort. Or you may decide, like I've got clients who literally are coming from the engineering space, but have a real passion and a desire to transform the culture within their organization. And they've taken a stretch role into HR to be able to influence culture. But it was getting connected to their purpose and then seeing that right there in their organization, they didn't have to go out there and pitch for somebody else and go interview someplace else. There were opportunities right in their organization to be able to do that. I've got a client, it's so interesting. This speaks exactly to what Emily was saying. I've got a client in Germany who came to me. She's like, I just feel like I need to do more. I'm bored. I'm tapped out. And she's a technical writer, likes what she does, but she just thinks there's more that can be done. And so oh gosh, that's popping up on my screen. As we started to flesh out for her, what exactly, what is it that you want to do? She's like, I really want to play a role in helping women in STEM excel. Like, I want to create opportunities for them. I want them, like, there's nobody that looks like us, as we get higher and higher in the ranks, and I want to be a part of that. She's a librarian by like old history. So she's got librarian skills. She's got technical writing skills. She's big into self-help. She's all this. And I said, well, why don't you think about starting an ERG? Like her organization did not have an ERG. And she was like, oh. I was like, why don't you start the thing for women that you are craving to have? And so she thought about it, and she got kind of scared about it. She was like, oh, I got to step up and do something. And literally when she made the decision that that's something she wanted to explore, and we put a strategy in place, this was right before COVID happened. She sent an article to the head of HR just about something innocuous related to how they address COVID. Fast forward 2 weeks, she gets this email from her head of HR, because now everybody's been sheltering in place and we got to figure out what's going to be our new normal when people come back. So the HR sends her a message and says, hey, I just wanted to get some of your thoughts. Thank you for this article. Do you have any ideas as we start to think about how we piece together our organization and what this is going to look like post-COVID? And she says, well, looky who, I actually do. And not only was it about working from home and some of that other stuff, she was able to present this idea of creating an ERG, or affinity. And for those who don't know, ERG is Employee Resource Group, creating that for women. And she's like, I would love to spearhead that. And the head of HR was like, absolutely, let me pull my team together. Let's talk about it. So she now has a seat at the table to talk about this thing. They've got so much else on their plate that it's one of those important initiatives, but not urgent. But she was able to be like, I will handle it. Because they want it done. We just don't want it within HR. We'd like somebody from the business to be able to take this and run with it. She's taking it and she's running with it. And so she is now implementing something in Germany that does not exist in her company yet, to be able to inspire and equip and provide resources and mentorship and professional skill drilling and all of that for these women in STEM, the very thing that she had decided that she wanted to be about. And the catalyst came through HR. Like the fuel came with her going to HR and being like, I've got this idea. What do you think? And so I say all that to say that for her, the answer to this perfect work desire was right in her backyard. It was just a matter of her deciding, where can I add value, and am I willing to step up, open my mouth, have a voice. And then HR became the support and the advocate and all of that for her to be able to do that. And so now she's getting to change the face of her company and change the experience that women are having within that company, and being able to leverage the US and best practices in other parts of Europe, because there's other companies that have established ERGs that she can learn, okay, what do we want to implement here? right? But she hasn't left her job. She hasn't quit. She hasn't done any of that stuff, but she's able to be utilized in a way that is so much more meaningful. And now she's becoming a thought leader right there in that space. And to Emily's earlier point, you never know what learning how to build this thing from scratch, what that skill that she's going to develop in doing that, how that's going to open up a door down the road, right?
And look, I'll just add, and I'm going to add, look, stretch assignment, you mentioned that. So important. I mentioned Bridget, that's what got me exposed to governance, and that's how I ended up at AGB. But even here, being here 2.5 years, I took a 10-month stretch assignment as interim CHRO. So that meant I was leading HR. And that's not my background, right? But I will tell you, learning about your people needs, gives you a whole other perspective as an executive.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are things now that I don't have to do that anymore, that as a boss, as someone who has people reporting to me, as a people manager, I consider, because I've had that exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's another reason to look to HR as your executives, and you're like, I might need a change. You're seeing a lot of that now, people who have not come up in the ranks as an HR professional,
Yep.
but are an executive in another area, that are taking assignments in HR to get that people perspective. So it's critical.
So the point is that there's a lot of resource that's available: upskilling your talent, continuing education, gaining opportunities. I have a client who, she actually was, she got a board position for a company or for an organization that's going to set her up 5 years from now to be able to kind of leave and pivot and do something totally different. But she ended up getting that board position because within her company, they have a board matching program where they will match their employees at, and then you don't have to be EVP of anything, you can be regular Joe, but they will match their employees with boards that are a great fit for them to be able to get different kinds of experiences and exposures. She didn't even know it was an option until we worked together. She figured out that she actually wanted to do this work, and the only way to be able to do it was to be able to get some exposure on a board. And as soon as she recognized that that was the goal, she starts having conversations. Lo and behold, there's a program within her company that does that. And so I say all this to say that when we're thinking about what's next, it's not so out of reach. And so this particular part of your business, part of your company, could be a great resource in catapulting you forward with whatever it is that you're deciding to do. And so my hope is that from this conversation, it opens you up to think about what's going on in my company. Am I really exhausting everything that we have? It's not just about changing my benefits every year, or if I have a baby, I gotta change my all that. Like, it's not, HR can be so much more than that. And if your company is not a part of SHRM, then this is something you might want to tap them on to get connected, because SHRM is doing innovative things, and the more innovative your organization becomes, the more it's going to impact your ability to really grow and thrive. And if you're an HR professional, you definitely should be attached. And if you're thinking about pivoting in any way to do people work, culture, D&I, wellness, any of those kinds of things that you're thinking about making a pivot in some way, it would be hugely important to be connected to SHRM. Yeah. And so there's one question that I really want to ask you, Emily, and this is something that stands out to me about you. So you've shared at different points in time how important it is to be supported, to be sponsored, to be advocated for. And you have been supported and sponsored and advocated for all throughout your career, whether it was when you were at Duke University and you had John Pierce supporting you, whether it was when you had Tom Ross supporting you, who was president of the UNC system, whether it's your current boss who literally took you from one organization to the next. And so what I'd love to understand, and what I hope listeners would want to understand as well, is how do you position yourself for those opportunities? One, because they come to you. And then two, how do you begin to honor, nurture, and capitalize on those relationships such that, man, they can carry you through your career? Because I think that's something that's kind of unique and different and special about you.
Wow. So I've been putting together a list of things that as a leader, I think my team should know to expect from me. And one of the things I truly believe in is that your loudest voice is your work ethic. I say this all the time. And so really all of those people, it's been about work ethic. Even at Duke, if we go as far back to John, right? I didn't tell him I was in law school when I took the job as his admin. I didn't want him to think that there would be any barrier for me to do the job well as his admin. And literally, if one day he didn't see something on the fax machine that I was sending him my application for the Student Bar Association, he would have never known.
Mm-hmm.
But once he did know, and he was married to someone who was a lawyer, he then thought that they're fine. Well, she can take on more work. And there he gave me opportunities within the work to look at the contracts we were doing with some of the vendors, to sit in on some of the meetings, asking me afterwards what were my thoughts on some of those things. And so I think when people see that you're capable, then they just they stretch what there are no barriers. Almost you become boundaryless within what you're doing. They know that you're open to exposure. And I would say that with everyone. With President Ross, I didn't report directly to him. I reported to one of his VPs, and she was on leave. So he then, he just think about the type of leader he was. I said, well, would you like me to sit in on the executive team meetings because she's on leave? Sure, right? He felt there was no problem with that. And then even upon her return, I still got to sit in on some meetings. And ultimately, there was a project that was important to him, and he asked me to do that. And that's how we got to work together on that. And then I say the same thing. I remember I had a boss who recently passed away, who was the president of Elizabeth City State University, Dr. Thomas Conway. At the time, he was chief of staff at Fayetteville State. And I remember so clearly him saying to me, you're a director, because, we always want to be seen as helpful.
Yeah.
His advice to me was, I know you want to be helpful and you want to help this event and put this together and manage this event, but you're not an event manager, right? You're my director of government and community affairs. And you have to be seen as such. And you can be helpful in other ways, but people have to know that you have that executive presence so they can see you in other ways. That takes a lot for him to say that, right? And it's a piece of advice that I give to my directors now. I just promoted someone to a VP of public policy. And it's one of the things I said to her is, you now, as much as you want to help, there got to be other ways for you to help. And that doesn't mean you don't pick up something here or there, but literally I was down there trying to arrange tables and do all sorts of stuff I had no business doing. And he was like, you have to be seen that way. So I think they just felt comfortable. I'll also say, I'm one of 3 girls. So my dad had no sons. So we watch sports. I'm a huge sports fan. So my interests are very similar. I find commonalities. I can talk about things. I can talk about current events. And I think when we just look for commonalities, that gender and all that other stuff goes away, you find someone that you think appreciates the opportunity as well. And it's the same thing with my current boss. I told you, we were in the HBCU space, had not worked together, but he observed my work ethic. And then once I had access to him, I wasn't somebody that was blowing his phone up all the time. It was, if I knew I was coming to DC for work, do you have 20 minutes to share some insights with me? When I got that first contract to come up to DC to work, I called him. I was like, is this something, because people don't prepare us for all the other things beyond salary that come in. We could have a whole other discussion about that, right? All those other things other than that number that are so important to your package, especially when you're relocating.
Yeah.
So I would say I just, for some reason, maybe, and it's not everybody, but people felt comfortable once they knew I was a hard worker in investing some extra time and comments in me, in saying and being able to say, let me give you this piece of advice.
Mm-hmm. Answer that question for us. You alluded to something that if you have the time, we'll go ahead and keep talking about it. You talked about package and salary. And I had actually, that was a question that I had, and I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to get to it, but I really want to talk about that because you are coming from as an HR insider. And this is all about redesigning your success to get highly paid to do work you love. The number part is a part of it, but there's so many elements. And so from an HR insider perspective, you've got women now who have bated breath. Like, okay, tell me something. When we're looking at offers, how, particularly now with gender parity being such a big part of the conversation and all of that, and we know that women on average, there's all kinds of statistics, but on average are making about 78 cents to the dollar, from their, counterparts. And so on. But with all this conversation around that, should women still be aggressively negotiating their offers? Are they leaving money on the table if they're thinking that HR is now supposed to be looking into gender parity? Like, how should they be thinking about negotiating opportunities? And then what should they be negotiating beyond the money?
Wow. So my boss says to me, I should write a blog about this, because every time something happens where we see someone make a mistake in negotiations, and especially when a lot of times it's a woman of color for some reason, just because he'll look at me and say, I told you need to talk about this more. So here goes. I actually have been writing down what the 5 things that I think about when I think about packages, right?
Okay, yes.
1, all that glitters is not gold.
Okay.
So I was one of those people that thought, okay, I get to work for this big fancy brand. That means I'm going to make money. I'm going to make more money than everybody. X, not necessarily the case, because they know part of the allure is being able to say, I work at this brand. And so you get all these other perks per se in saying that, but you're probably not getting what, you think you're going to make. And I used to be on the board of Black Entertainment Sports Association. So I was like, oh my God, these people probably making like all this money and all of this. And then you really learn. And my CEO worked for Paramount. He worked for places. So he would say, oh, Emily, if you're caught up in the brand, it's not what you think.
Yeah.
So don't get caught up in the brand, and then you get there and the number is far lower than what you thought, and you thought it would be something because of the brand. So all that glitters isn't gold.
Yeah.
Number 2 is add up everything in the package. So I can't assign a value to the fact that SHRM has open leave. And let me tell you how crazy I am. I took the job and I just went online and it said 20 days. So I didn't realize that executives got chiefs, which is what the executive leadership team got open leave upon signing their thing. They didn't get the 20 days. So, the rank and file staff had 20 days. Executives had open leave. So when I found that out, I was like, there's no value you can assign to open leave, because you don't have to worry about negotiating time. Where it is, you're sick, stay home. Your parents been married for 50 years. They're having a cruise. The family's going on a cruise. Go on the cruise, right? Work it out through your person, through your people manager. But look, you can't put a value on open leave on a culture that says we want you to take time. And unfortunately, cultures that have open leave, people seem to take less time. So we spend a lot of time trying to get people to take time, and you got to do that. So I know we get caught up in that, but that's a value in itself, of being able to take the time you need when you need a break to do it. So that's one piece of the package. LTIP, long-term incentive plans. No one talks about that. They don't prepare you for those types of things. Like, there are actually long-term incentive plans to keep you in that position for a period of 3 years, 2 years, and then you get money at the end of that period as a bonus of saying, thank you for staying, thank you for the continuity. They don't think about that. Bonus structure. So I tell the story of moving from HEB to, from job to job. It may be for a salary that's within 5,000 or 6,000, right? But if your opportunity for bonus is much higher, my next rule is bet on yourself. Right? And that is something both my husband and my current boss say all the time, because I was waffling back on an offer and my husband was like, wait a minute. So let me get this right. Same base, but this new opportunity gives you an opportunity to make more at the end of the year because you can earn more in bonus. Of course, bet on yourself. Who else? You want other people to bet on you, bet on yourself. If you're a performer, if you're a high performer and you have an opportunity to get 30% as a bonus at the end of the year, why not shoot for it?
Yep.
So bet on yourself is one. The other thing is culture is part of the package. We talked about it briefly, right? You walk in there, you got to ask what the culture is. They should be able to convey to you succinctly what the culture is. So if you came to SHRM today and you said to me, Emily, what's the culture here? I would say we're looking for people who do their work with a bold purpose, people who do their work with excellence and accountability, who are flexible and agile, smart and curious, and open collaborators. If that's not you, then that's probably not the culture here for you. And that's fine, but I want to give you all that information up front. And by the way, we're a challenge culture, a little competitive, but expect to be challenged. We can have a friendly go at it and then expect me to say, okay, what we're going to go get for lunch, right? That is, so it is that type of thing. You've got to go and ask about it. We go in and we want to change places to adapt to us. We don't have to do that if we are talented individuals. You can find a place that has a culture that works for you. Stop thinking we have to go in and fight and change that culture to work around us. Why do so if we ask the question up front? And the last thing, your network is your net worth. So not everybody you connect on LinkedIn. The people who you can call and have a discussion with and say, I need you to do this, or do you know this person? That's so important. Cultivate that, treasure it. Don't misuse it or abuse it, because there may come a time like now where we're going into a recession and we're looking at people who are making $100,000 a year. So that's good money. They're talking about now that some of those jobs are the next wave of jobs that'll be disappearing, right? And we're talking about a market that 3 months ago was an employee's market. Today is an employer's market. Your network is going to be even more important. Don't forget about those people. Don't just call them when you need something. Check in on it, cultivate it, take care of it. So those are my 5 things. And so it's never about, you want a number that makes sense. And I can go in a whole thing about make sure you know geography. We had somebody I'll never forget, who was coming from New York, going to take a job in DC, and was making less and gave us this number that was so extreme. She missed out on a job that would have been hers had she come in at a really good number, but she went way overboard saying, oh, well, in New York it's this. You're coming to DC. That's a whole different market. If you're going to do that type of research, you got to get it right, because you might come at somebody with that wrong number and they're like, she couldn't even do her research on there. So no matter how good she may have done in that job, she's just not smart. Yeah. Right. So just think about the whole picture, and my favorite one there is bet on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great. Awesome. And actually, there were 6 things to consider with you. So you added something in there. This has been so awesome. Definitely awesome. And I might actually leave it in as it is and make it like an encore part of the interview. But this was golden. This was golden. And you're absolutely right. All that glitters is not gold. And it's so interesting. I did consulting for a company that was going through a merger. Another company was acquiring them. And if I said the name of the brand, everybody would know it. And it was a cool company to work for. Like, it was just cool. And they had all kinds of perks. And I mean, really, it was a cool company, cool CEO, the whole bit. Those folks got paid peanuts. Like, for every role that they were, like every role. And I trained the entire staff. Every role, they were woefully underpaid in their industry for the work that they did. And it was in exchange for the glitter. And it was in exchange for being in a really cool environment. And it was in exchange for some really, really cool perks. And again, at the end of the day, that's a contract between the employer and the employee. It's not a bad strategy. It's just one that to your point, that it's important to be aware of. Because sometimes what we think is really cool and flashy, if your value is to get paid from a salary perspective, you might not get that from cool and flashy. You might get that from a very understated company that nobody's ever heard of, but you're taking some extra change to the bank. And so again, doesn't mean that company was bad. People who were there were happy. They were a really happy bunch, and they were happy for lots of reasons, but it wasn't because they were getting paid.
Oh my gosh, that is exactly what you're talking about with culture, right? You got to choose what it is that's important to you. And unfortunately, a lot of people see that flashy and they think that's the only way, and they're leaving money on the table at good organizations. Again, I didn't know much about SHRM. I mean, Johnny had been a chairman of the board at some point in the past, but you really think about that. And he spends a lot of time thinking about how we pay people. Compensation is very hard. Yeah. So when you're thinking about a whole package, they're very thoughtful about it. And that may not be the case elsewhere, because you're right. I'm throwing you meals and perks and this. And so I don't have to be real thoughtful about your compensation. But things like a long-term incentive plan. So you mean to tell me there are years where you can get a check for a long-term incentive plan, get your regular salary, and get your bonus at the end of the year?
Now, can people negotiate that? So obviously companies can have what they decide they're going to offer. Like they may have long-term incentive plan. They may have this in place. They may have that in place. For women that are listening in on this, are you advocating that they negotiate those elements, or are you simply saying you need to be aware that these are options and actually factor them into your decision?
So I'm saying be aware and factor, but I will tell you, I remember a situation where we had someone coming from a place and they would have vested in their pension at that place if they stayed 6 months. So they were 6 months shy of vesting. So part of their, because some places do signing bonuses, others don't.
Yeah.
But so this particular place doesn't do signing bonuses, but they wanted this person, and they said, "Look, we'll do a moving right? So you just call it something else, right? A relocation bonus valued at whatever that loss is that you're going to take by coming 6 months early.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let people know if there's a situation, if they really want you, they'll work through there. So there'll be a way that maybe, again, that falls outside the salary, but it's compensation nonetheless.
Yeah.
And we don't think about all the things that go in with relocation. I can tell you when I relocated, I end up staying in Embassy Suites because it's so much, it's overwhelming, right? And so having that opportunity within your HR department to say, look, we'll use this as part of the relocation process because we don't do sign-on bonuses. You could have that policy. Mm-hmm. There are ways to do it. My boss always says, nothing is impossible.
Yep.
And if this is who you want, if she's somebody they want, you can say, look, I'm 3 months shy of being vested in this. I'm going to lose it all. It's valued at this. Can we, over the next 3 years, give me the value of what I'm leaving on the table? So year 1, I get 1/3. Year 2, I get 1/3. Year 3, I get 1/3. You can be creative. But let me say, you got to be coming to the table and coming correct and have that talent. Right? When they look at you and when you go back to your compensation committee, your board compensation committee, you got to tell them that you cut this deal. You got to be able to say, but we're getting the best talent for this deal. And so if you're going to ask for things like that, make sure you have your stuff together. Awesome. But on the other pieces, be aware, understand what that means. Do you have girlfriends? I have girlfriends that work for Microsoft, so they get stock. Yeah. Right? But listening to them on how they negotiate and what their comp package was, I was aware that there was something bigger than just the numbers. So when I had the opportunity to start getting a real package, it wasn't new to me. And I had someone in my life I can call and say, okay, how do we compare this? Mm-hmm. So, being in this space is not like being in like a Microsoft space. The packages look different, but you having people in your life who are already experiencing that, getting those people around you to start talking about it. We don't talk about that early enough. And then you get an offer and you're like, what is it? Yeah, what is this? And you're turning down stuff you don't even know about.
Yeah. No, awesome. This right here was golden. This right here was golden. So if you're listening to this conversation, I know that you've got pen and paper and you've been doing whatever you need to do to capture these golden nuggets, but this is awesome. And so again, Emily, we just want to thank you for sharing so much of your expertise. If you are on this page, click in, connect to SHRM. I think we added enough value here to know that whether you are in HR or not in HR, you need to know what this organization is putting out there, because this will affect the money in your pocket, the opportunities that come down the pike for you, and how you develop yourself into the leader that you want to be. And so I cannot recommend them highly enough. So click the link, click the button, whatever you need to do, get whatever they have to offer, and stay connected. And so with that, Emily, we again want to just thank you for being here. We're so excited to have you, and we appreciate all that you share. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.